Good afternoon, and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland, where for 97 years, issues of the day and provocative questions have been discussed and debated. My name is Jan Roller, and I am president of the club. Our topic today is the death penalty and the questions it poses about the dignity of human life. Our speaker is Sister Helen Prejean, who has been called a feisty nun with a big heart, the Mother Teresa of death row, and an outspoken critic of politicians and the legal system in her quest to eliminate the death penalty worldwide. The United States is the only Western democracy that executes people. Sister Helen's recent remarks have taken aim here in Ohio, where a failed lethal injection 3 days ago prevented the execution of a man convicted in 1984 of the rape and murder of a 14-year-old. Sister Helen grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and entered the convent at 18. Her comfortable, private spirituality was shaken when she became the pen pal of Patrick Saunier, a convicted killer of 2 teenagers who was on death row in Louisiana's Angola State Prison. She came when he asked her to visit, and her observation of the process by which the state executes the condemned led to her book and film Dead Man Walking in 1995. She worked closely with the movie's producer, director Tim Robbins, and Susan Sarandon, the actress who played Sister Helen in the movie. But Sister Helen is sensitive to both sides of the death penalty issue, murderers and the victims' families. She has used her organizing skills to found Survive, a victims' family support group in New Orleans. Her second book is The Death of Innocence, an eyewitness account of wrongful execution, published in December of 2004. It is an account of 2 men who Sister Helen believes were innocent and who she accompanied to their executions. In the book, she also examines the recent history of death penalty decisions by the United States Supreme Court and the track record of then Governor of Texas, George W. Bush. Sister Helen has appeared on almost every talk show across this nation, and she espouses the consistent life ethic. As well as her views against the death penalty, she is also against abortion, euthanasia, and suicide. Please welcome our fascinating guest today to the podium, Sister Helen Prejean.
Okay, folks, we'll make every minute count. Thank you for having me here today. I've been here before. I love Cleveland. You're like the cultural center of the world here. But there's a problem. Ohio, you have 166 people on death row. You've executed 33 people. You tried really hard. And I have to say you, because our hands are in it when it's our state. It's the way democracies work. We don't have the death penalty in this country without the support of the people, at least tacitly. And so if Governor Strickland doesn't hear from a whole lot of people, Mr. Broom is going to be, they're going to make another attempt in a week to kill him again. They tried to puncture, 18 times to find a vein. Lethal injection, you see, is supposed to be quiet and humane. We just put him to sleep. When lethal injection came into Louisiana, one of the associate wardens said, "Gonna be boring. It's gonna be nothing to see. Just go to sleep." Justice Antonin Scalia, fellow Catholic, said, "How enviable a quiet death by lethal execution when you compare what happened to the victims." What's the value system he's working out of? A quiet, enviable death, lethal injection. Does everybody know about pancurmonium bromide that paralyzes the person completely? If the sleep potion thing doesn't work, you're fully alive and conscious. You can't lift a finger. You can't cry out when they kill you. Why do we try to make death so antiseptic? And I want to make a connection with the death penalty. And I know I'm going to push you hard on this, and maybe you never even made the connection. But see, I've accompanied 6 people to execution. And I've watched 3 people as they're electrocuted to death, and I've watched 3 human beings as they're lethally injected. It is easy to kill a monster. This person, look at this crime, look what they did. It is hard to kill a real human being. And I don't know what's happening with the guards and the people on that team that were trying to insert those needles in Mr. Brown. And when at one point he tried to help him find the vein in his arm, and when at one point he put his hands over his face and began to cry and lost his composure because it was taking so long. There are stories in here about the real killing of human beings. I have a friend who belongs to the John Adams program of the ACLU that is defending suspected terrorists in Guantanamo. And we are going through an era in this country where the acceptance of torture has been approved from the White House on down, and it provided the climate in which what has happened in Guantanamo. How did we get to a point where we said we could accept torture in order to get information that we needed in order to save our people? How do we get there? There's always climate before there's action. And what happened at Abu Ghraib and what happened on Guantanamo, and I know from Denny LaBeouf, you know, in the John Adams Project, I know some of the stuff that goes on. I know the Red Cross report. I know that they had a kid as young as 16 that they pulled off the street, suspected terrorists. What's the evidence? What's the charge? And they called him a frequent flyer, and they moved him from cell to cell. They let him sleep an hour, then they go wake him up, move him to another cell. And within a number of weeks, the kid is banging his head on the wall. There was a graffiti written on the wall in one of the secret interrogation places: no blood, no foul. The modern form of torture, you don't show blood. You do waterboarding. You freeze people. You deprive them of meals. You deprive them of sleep. You tie them up in stress positions. How do we do that? And it is related, I believe, to the death penalty, because nobody sees the pain. And look at the terrible crime they did. They deserve to die. A quiet, enviable death by lethal injection. How did I get there? Believe me, when I started out as a nun, I never knew I'd ever go to death row. You don't start out as a nun saying you're going to go to death row. I mean, you know, I was teaching kids in school. It was like, but it was an awakening in my own faith about what Jesus was about. And for years, what I thought Jesus was about was being my Savior. I prayed for people. I was always charitable. Charity was always paramount. But I didn't get it about justice. And I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where African-American people, the only ones I knew personally, were people who were our servants. I went to an all-white private school. I rode buses where black people were forced to go in the back of the bus. I never questioned it because I didn't know people personally. And when I awakened to Jesus, which is the call to justice and to be with those who have no voice and to be with those who are marginated and downtrodden, my teachers became African-American people in the St. Thomas Housing Project in New Orleans. And that's where I learned about the other America. That's where I learned about what if you're a black man and police stop you and pick you up and what happens to you. Or if you're a person with resources, what happens to you? I'm going to St. Joseph Academy and learning how to do public debate in high school, and kids are coming into Hope House in St. Thomas who are going to the public school in the 11th grade, and they can't read a third grade reader. The failures of public schools in inner cities because we got a two-tier system. I begin to see what happens in families when you don't have health care, when your kids die because you can't get health care. I begin to see it from the point of view of the people who are doing the suffering. And I, a woman of white privilege, my father a lawyer and a successful businessman, I never knew